To the Planning Committee meeting. It is 1 o'clock on September the 18th, and we will go ahead and start our Planning Committee meeting. If you would like to speak today, we have a sign-up sheet in the back and would appreciate your name on there, or we had a sign-up sheet in the back. So the first issue on our agenda is the I-64 Louisville pipeline proposal, and I want to go ahead just straight away and ask Mr. Greg Heitzman from Louisville Water Company to start us off. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having us back. I'm going to do a brief introduction, give a little bit of background of where we've been over the past month. As you're aware, we visited the committee 1 month ago and provided some supplemental information, but we've been working very hard to complete our financial analysis of the alternatives of looking at obtaining water from Pool 3 versus pipeline along the Interstate 64 from Louisville. And we about 2 months ago, retained a consulting firm, R.W. Beck, and the primary focus of today's presentation will be for R.W. Beck to present its findings. And we'll do that with a PowerPoint presentation, and I believe every one of you have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation in front of you as well. It's identical. We also have a copy of the full report that we'll make available to council members as well. Let me introduce my staff again. Vince Gunther. Vince, if you could stand up. Vince is manager of our government affairs. Jim Smith is manager of infrastructure planning, both with the Louisville Water Company. With R.W. Beck, I'd like to introduce Ed Wetzel. Ed, if you could stand up. And Michael Lane. And at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Ed and Michael for their presentation.
Thank you, Greg. My name again is Ed Wetzel. I'm an executive vice president with R.W. Beck. And also with me today is Michael Lane. Michael is a senior financial analyst with the firm. I should warn you that earlier in my career I was a college professor, so my instinct is to tell you that I'm going to keep you for the next 50 minutes until the bell rings. But rather than that, we have an agenda that we're presenting to you today. It should take us 15 or 20 minutes to go through this presentation, and at the end we'll have plenty of time available for questions. Let me first describe the project that we've undertaken. Fundamentally, this is a financial analysis of two delivery alternatives. The first we'll call the Pool 3 option, which is an option that has been designed by Kentucky American Water Company, and it uses Pool 3 of the Kentucky River as the source water for this particular water supply alternative. The second option, which we'll call the LWC option, is a pipeline that extends from Kentucky 53 in Shelby County into Fayette County, and that source of supply is the Ohio River. We're going to be looking at these two options under two distinct flow scenarios. The need for this project has been described in various places in two different ways. First, as a peaking plant model, that being the construction of a 25 MGD treatment plant, but only operating at approximately about 20% of that capacity, or around 6 million gallons per day, with the remaining capacity available for drought supply conditions. In other places, we've seen this plant proposed as a capacity expansion plant, that is to say, available to serve the future needs of the citizens of central Kentucky. And under that scenario, we have modeled this assuming that the average flow each year goes up by an increment of about 500,000 gallons per day. Now, given the fact that the flows could increase in this plant, that begs the question, what happens beyond about the year 2030 when this plant runs out of capacity? And in that scenario, we've actually said we're going to look at this under two phases. An initial phase, which takes us to the year 2030, and a second phase that goes beyond the year 2030 out to the year 2050. So Michael and his modeling team have looked at this as a 20-year modeling effort and then a 40-year modeling effort. Well, like any financial model that gets constructed, there are a number of assumptions, and I just want to highlight for you some of the key assumptions that are in this model. The first is that RWBAC has done no independent cost estimates that have gone into this model. All of the capital cost and operating expenses that are built into our model have come from previous reports or previous documentation that we've obtained as part of this analysis. Most of the information has come from Kentucky American, either through the Gannett-Fleming report that was published in March, or through testimony they've provided to the Public Service Commission. As you can see on the chart, there are a number of percentages that have been applied, and if you have any specific questions about why we've chosen various percentages, I'm going to turn that over to Mike as you have questions. The one item I will point out to you, though, is that notice partway down on the page the LWC wholesale rate increase. We have assumed a 3% increase in the Louisville Water Company wholesale rate. Now, the water that's provided to the Louisville pipeline comes from the Louisville Water Company, and they, in fact, will be charging their wholesale rate for that water as it hits the Kentucky 53 interface. We've assumed 3% a year for a couple of reasons. One, over the last 15 years, their wholesale rate increase has averaged 2%. Secondly, if you look at the other financial and economic metrics we've built into this model, that being 2.4% inflation and assumed 3% increase in construction costs over the next 20 years, 3% seemed like a reasonable estimate for what the wholesale rate might do over the next 20 or 40 years. But given the sensitivity of this model to that particular parameter, we have also modeled as part of a sensitivity analysis 1% and 5% in addition to 3% to just see how sensitive the results are to that. We won't be presenting that to you today. It is in our final report, and you certainly we're happy to answer any questions you might have about that. Well, let's take a look at what this might look like on a map, and you can see, and I'm sure you've seen photos and maps of this all over the place, but the Pool 3 option, as it's described, starts with the construction of the 25 million gallon per day plant at Pool 3 and is transmitted down to Fayette County through 30 miles of a 42-inch pipeline. The alternative from Louisville, if you look on your graph, there is a green portion of the Louisville pipeline which is actually going to be constructed by the Louisville Water Company to Kentucky 53 in Shelby County. This project picks that up at Kentucky 53 and transports it along the I-64 corridor to essentially the same location in Fayette County. So then if we look at the specifics of what are embedded in each of these two options, first, the Pool 3 option, as I mentioned, has a 25 MGD intake, treatment plant, and pump station located at the Pool 3 site. It then has a 42-inch transmission main traveling about 30 miles into Fayette County. Along that line, there will be an assumption of a booster pump station and a 3 million gallon storage tank. There is also embedded in this particular option a UV system to be built in the year 2011. Now, this is to be in compliance with the drinking water regulations that have a compliance deadline of 2012. It is not today being designed into the Kentucky American facility, but room has been left for it in that facility with the understanding that it may be required in the future. It doesn't have a big impact on the analysis, but we did want to put it in for completeness. Finally, the O&M expenses were obtained from Kentucky American documentation through their PSC testimony, and we've also included in this model the Kentucky River Authority withdrawal fee of about 5 cents per 1,000 gallons. On the other side, the LWC option, we don't have a treatment facility, as you know, but we do have 42 miles of 42-inch transmission main, again, a booster pump station, a 3 million gallon storage tank. And to comply with future drinking water regulations in this particular case, Louisville Water Company is constructing riverbank filtration, and that's scheduled to be completed in the year 2009. I should point out, though, that the capital cost for that is not included in our model. Rather, that will be embedded in their wholesale rate and in future increases in their wholesale rate. Even though this water is not being withdrawn from the Kentucky River, we have assumed the Kentucky River Authority withdrawal fee in this case, recognizing that the KRA really needs these fees in the future to make some of the improvements that they've committed to make along the Kentucky River. And finally, the Louisville Water Company wholesale rate which today is at $1.71 per 1,000 gallons. And as I mentioned previously, this will increase at 3% a year for the duration of this study. So what happens now if you take a look at those capital projects? What's the comparison of the capital costs you get between the Pool 3 option and the LWC option? And these numbers should not be a surprise to you because they're pretty consistent with numbers that have been presented to you in the past. There is a difference in those two capital cost projects of about $54 million, assuming a construction time frame of 2008 and 2009, and those are in 2007 dollars. So the capital costs are about 48% higher for the Pool 3 option than they are for the Louisville pipeline option. Now, what the model does is takes these capital costs, it translates those into debt service payments for the municipal portion of the project, and it also translates those into return on rate base for the Kentucky American portion of the project, because this is what the customers of the system are going to pay for. So it takes those capital components, added to that are the O&M expenses over the next 20 years, plus on the Louisville Water Company side, the wholesale water rate that Louisville Water will charge to put this water in the LWC pipeline. When we do that analysis, we convert that into a life cycle present worth cost between the two options. And what comes out of that under two scenarios are very similar results. First of all, under the peaking plant flow model, that is to say, if these plants operate at a steady 6 MGD for the next 20 years, no increase in flow, the difference in the net present worth of these two options, in the case of the Pool 3 option, it's about $316 million. In the case of the LWC option, it's about $250 million, or a difference of about $66 million. Now, in the scenario where the flows increase by half an MGD per year, the differences are smaller. And in the case of the Pool 3 option, the net present worth costs are $326 million, and the LWC option is almost $300 million. So the difference there is a little less than $30 million under this scenario. Now, under the condition, as I mentioned earlier, where the flows increase each year, at some point, the Pool 3 plant runs out of capacity, and the Louisville pipeline runs out of capacity. So that begs the question, what happens after the year 2030? And under that scenario, it's clear that some kind of phase 2 will be required, that in the case of the Pool 3 option will likely require a new pipeline to the Ohio River, which is about a 30-mile run from Pool 3 north to the Ohio River. And we've seen various alignments for this pipeline, and it's somewhere between 30 and 40 miles. We've assumed 30 miles, which is as the crow flies, for the purposes of our modeling effort. I think that the alignment that we show on this graph is actually closer to about 34 miles, but nevertheless, we've used 30 miles as a reasonable estimate of what these expenses might be. The alternative on the Louisville pipeline side is simply the construction of a parallel pipeline to the existing 42-inch line that's already been constructed in phase 1. So once again, let's take a look at specifically what's involved in the two alternatives. Well, first of all, in various places we've seen estimates that the Pool 3 capacity under drought conditions could be as much as 30 million gallons per day. Now, Kentucky American currently holds a 20 MGD permit for that facility. But we believe, or we've read in reports, that they believe there's 30 MGD of capacity. So we've accepted that and said, all right, if there's 30 MGD of capacity in Pool 3, that means to get to a future capacity by the year 2050 of, say, 45 MGD, we would need to construct a 15 MGD intake facility at the Ohio River north, and that facility would also have to have a pump station to pump the water down to Pool 3. So that's the first item identified in this second phase Pool 3 option. We need a 30-mile pipeline then, and this would have to be about a 30-inch raw water main down to Pool 3. The Pool 3 plant would have to be expanded at that point from 25 to 45 million gallons per day, and we'd have to run a parallel 30-mile pipeline from Pool 3 back down to Fayette County. That would require an additional booster pump station for that pipeline and an additional, we've estimated, 2 million gallon storage tank along the alignment. And there will be a couple of additional staff needed at this point because you've got a new facility up on the Ohio River that will have to be staffed and maintained. Now, the option to that is the Louisville pipeline. And in the second phase, there's no need to run an additional line up to the Ohio River, nor is there a need to expand any treatment facilities. In fact, one of the benefits that Louisville Water Company, quite frankly, has in this case is they've got facilities with excess capacity. So the only thing that has to be done in the second phase for the Louisville pipeline will be the construction of a parallel 30-inch main from Kentucky 53 to Fayette County. We've also included an additional booster pump station and an additional 2 million gallon storage tank, but no additional staff will be needed in this particular alternative. Now, as you might expect, given the amount of construction that has to take place in the two options, the Pool 3 option, as we've described it here, is quite a bit more expensive. In fact, it's twice as expensive as the second phase of the Louisville pipeline would be, or a difference of almost $90 million. And if we once again run this through the model then and translate that into a life cycle present worth cost, the differences are as shown on this table. Now, once again, we've run the analysis assuming 6 million gallons per day constant flow. Now, realize if we do 6 million gallons constant flow throughout the 40 years of this analysis, there's no need to construct the second phase facilities because they're only going to need to accommodate 6 MGD. Therefore, there is no additional construction required for the constant flow 6 MGD alternative, and so you will see present worth costs that are not a great deal larger than they were in phase 1 because nothing new has been built. And so we're simply extending out the model from 20 years to 40 years to get to the additional cost. But the difference has grown over that additional 20 years to almost a $100 million difference in present worth costs between Pool 3 and the LWC options. Where you see the big jump is if you have to expand the facilities for both Pool 3 and the Louisville pipeline. In this case, look how much larger the present worth costs are, $625 million over 40 years compared to about $510 million over 40 years, or a difference of well over $100 million, about $117 million, if you have to construct those second phase facilities and you do this analysis over 40 years. Now, the last thing that we looked at was the feasibility of perhaps constructing a smaller diameter pipeline from Louisville. We've used a 42-inch diameter pipeline in the model because there was a 42-inch diameter pipeline from Pool 3 down to Fayette County. So what we've done here is saying for an apples-to-apples comparison, we wanted to make the pipeline the sizes the same. But we were also asked to look at a smaller diameter pipeline and determine is it feasible and how much additional money could be spent if we used that smaller diameter pipeline. So the logic of that is obviously the smaller diameter pipeline gives you lower material costs and lower construction costs. We believe you can build a pipeline with lower contingencies and lower engineering costs. We've looked at the flow velocities for the 36-inch diameter pipeline, and we believe they're acceptable up to 25 MGD, perhaps as high as 30 MGD. Although realize that the smaller diameter pipeline will result in larger energy losses along the pipeline, we've accommodated that by adding an additional booster pump station along the pipeline and included that in the cost model. So when you do that and you compare the capital cost for both, this is only phase 1 now, the capital cost for the Pool 3 plant, the Pool 3 option, the 42-inch Louisville pipeline option, and the 36-inch Louisville pipeline option, we get an additional construction savings, project cost savings of about $25 million by going to the 36 in lieu of the 42-inch pipeline, and almost $80 million difference between the Pool 3 construction cost and the 36-inch diameter pipeline cost. Once again, we've translated that into present worth cost Phase 1 through the year 2030, and you can see on the charts here that if we look at the 6 MGD constant flow scenario, that what we've done is picked up at about another $38 million in present worth savings. And if we look at the increasing flow per year over the 20 years, again, about $37 million savings over the 42-inch diameter pipeline. So it looks like the 36-inch pipeline may be a viable alternative, and certainly you would see cost savings, or the customers would see cost savings as a result of that. So what are the conclusions of our study? First of all, that the construction costs for a Louisville pipeline option are lower than the Pool 3 option in all scenarios. Secondly, that as we look at life cycle present worth costs, that over the 20 years of analysis in Phase 1, the ratepayers could save somewhere between $28 million and $66 million, depending on whether it's the 6 MGD constant flow or the increasing flow alternative. Over the 40 years of analysis, if we go to the Phase 2 investigation, those savings will increase to between $98 million and $117 million. And then finally, a 36-inch pipeline is a viable alternative, and we could see an additional cost savings of perhaps $37 or $38 million in this particular alternative. Questions?
Council members, if you are logged in and have questions, will you go ahead and indicate so on your electronic screen? Are there any questions? Do we have any? Okay, we'll go off of our electronic. It isn't showing our speakers. So who has a question? Councilmember Stimmett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming today. I appreciate your presentation. Just had a couple of follow-up questions from our previous two meetings. One, we consistently saw a number of $56 million for the Louisville option. Where is that in your presentation? Is that number now changed? Is that the 113 number now, or the $88 million number? Where's the original number at $56 million?
If we, can we go back? Can we go back? Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about this is there's a difference between what an estimated construction cost is and what we believe the total project cost might turn out to be. So if we can go back.
I think for this purpose, we want total cost.
Right.
The bottom line.
And that includes a contingency on the construction. It includes 25% for engineering, permitting, easements, administration, legal, all of those things that go into building a project, the so-called soft cost. And it also includes financing costs that will occur as a result of putting this through a bond issue or something similar to that.
The other thing, that $56 million that we presented at the previous meetings, they were 2005 costs that we had internally, and in working with R.W. Beck, we made a decision to use a cost assumption consistent with what the Bluegrass Water Supply Commission and Kentucky Americans consultant, because we knew that would be an issue as to whose costs would be right. So to get us close to an apple-and-apple comparison, we used a consistent per-cost unit rate as well as a consistent contingency, engineering, easements, right-of-way. So that way we've got as close to an apple-and-apple comparison as possible. So probably we pulled that up, let's see.
73 million.
It's that $56 million that we presented previously would compare to 73 using a consistent cost basis to what Kentucky American and Bluegrass has provided us in their previous reports.
Okay, now does that cost estimate include the, I don't know if you've received permission from the state or a response regarding the right-of-way or the bridge cost, having to go over the Kentucky River. Can you go over the bridge, under the bridge?
I'll make a comment, and then Ed can make a comment as well. What we decided to do, because we do not have that permit at this point in time, what we decided to do is, if you look down in that row that says engineering, permitting, administration, and land, it is the same consistent percentage. So if you look at, you've got $22 million in that row compared to 33 for the Pool 3 option. And so what we've made for the purposes of the study, in a worst-case scenario, we've made the assumption that the water line would go in easements parallel to Interstate 64. So that's the worst-case scenario from a cost. if we are successful in getting to go in a portion of the right-of-way, that would save those easement costs.
And does that include the cost of going over the river, either attaching to the bridge?
What we did there, since we do not have a permit to be on the bridge, what we did is we went back and reviewed the cost to go underneath the Kentucky River, and we added a premium above the base cost to go underneath the Kentucky River. That is included up in that $73 million number at the top right.
Okay.
So again, to normalize these so we have, again, it's best apple-and-apple comparison, we felt that that would be a very conservative approach.
And one final question on the wholesale water rates. What is their historical fluctuation? I mean, do they go up, down every year, every quarter? How often do they fluctuate, and when could we expect to see an increase?
In Louisville, what we do is we review our rates annually, every year. And we have a water rate increase every year. And last year's water rate increase was 6.5%. We mentioned earlier that we're talking about bringing in new advanced treatment for regulations that hit the water industry by 2012. And so we're seeing rate increases right now that are much higher than the rate of inflation by several percentage points to pay for that regulatory investment that's needed. So to your question, we review rates every year. If we go back the past 10 to 15 years, they're averaging between 2 and 3%. For the next 3 to 5 years, we see rates averaging about 5%. After that 5-year period, we see them drop back down to the rate of inflation in the 2.5% to 3% range. But our board does approve rates annually.
So the wholesale rates do fluctuate the same percentage as the retail rate?
The wholesale rate would fluctuate unless they're, because it's a cost of service. One thing that what we will notice is if we have a major wholesale customer, such as Lexington or Central Kentucky, that's going to provide an economy of scale, and it's actually going to reduce the pressure on rates because we're selling more bulk water. So we would expect those rate increases to be less than they currently are now, projected. Now, what we do typically is we review the rates annually, both retail and wholesale. Last year, for 2007, we raised both approximately the same amount. We haven't made a decision for next year, so in some cases we'll go every other year on a wholesale rate increase. Part of the reason is because those have to be approved by the Public Service Commission.
Right. Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councilmember Beard.
Thank you, Chair. Please excuse my voice, but I'm afraid the pollen has gotten to me or whatever. Water quality, and I know you probably can't speak for Kentucky Americans' water quality necessarily, but maybe you do monitor reports and things of that sort. Is it reasonable to assume that the Pool 3 option with a new state-of-the-art treatment center would put out better quality water than you presently are putting out or they're presently putting out at their present plant? I would ask that question of Linda, but Linda's not. There she is.
I'll give you the answer from the Louisville Water Company's perspective. First of all, both of us are required to meet the U.S. EPA regulations under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And currently, we both meet those regulations and exceed them. So that's the good news for all of our customers, Louisville customers as well as Central Kentucky customers. What we're planning is we recognize that water that comes from a surface water source, in our case the Ohio River, Kentucky Americans from the Kentucky River, there are 2 regulations that are going to be impacting us, and the deadline to be in compliance is 2012. So both of us, both Kentucky American as well as Louisville, are looking at ways to optimize our existing treatment processes and add what we in our industry call advanced treatment. We mentioned that earlier in the study. One of the assumptions that was in the Gannett-Fleming report that Kentucky American provided was an option to install UV ultraviolet light disinfection in 2010 or 2011 in advance of that 2012 EPA requirement. In our case, we are under construction now. We just awarded a contract 8 months ago to install what is known as riverbank filtration. And the way that works is it's water from the Ohio River goes through 100-foot thick natural sand aquifer and cleans the water on the front end, so it's a filter on the front end, and that allows us to meet those regulations of the future. So in both cases, we'll be prepared to meet those regulations in advance of 2012. So from my professional opinion, the Little Water Company does not have an issue with respect to meeting regulations. In fact, we will exceed them and currently do so now.
And I can assume the same would be the case for the new plant.
And to reiterate, that's the assumption that R.W. Beck picked up in the model, that a regulatory difference or a compliance difference or a water quality difference would be neutral in this analysis.
This being a capital-intensive project for either entity, and you're talking about a 6 million gallon a day normal flow presently.
Yes, that's
in
the assumption.
In the assumption.
That would be-
The ratepayer is going to have to pay, however, for a facility that can handle the 25 million gallon.
For the combination of both increasing capacity or growth as well as for drought protection, yes.
But they'll pay that on the front end. They won't pay it when we need it. They'll pay it from the get-go, for the most part.
They'll pay for it with a rate increase that would then be spread over future rates that are paid over the life of that project.
Because we will see 6 million, and then next month it might be 9 million, and the following month it might be 16 million, and then back down to 6 million. It's not going to be a constant flow, obviously.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember McCord.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for not being here the last time that you all came, and I just had a couple of questions from, I guess, the first time that you all came, and then I wanted to ask Nick Rowe with Kentucky American Water a couple of questions at the end, if that's okay. As it relates to the 64 corridor, what specific discussions have you had since the first time you were here and today with the Federal Highway Administration and the state?
We have not. I have a meeting scheduled with the state district to discuss the option. Again, as we mentioned previously, we're moving forward with the Jefferson County portion of Interstate 64 with construction, so we have a meeting scheduled on October 15th with the State Highway to explore that option of using permits for a portion or all of that route in order to be able to accommodate. And again, we think it's worth pursuing. The answer may be no, but we think it's worth pursuing because the road is being widened, and it's being widened to the center. And that's significantly different than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the state didn't know whether were going to be widening it to the center or widening it to the exterior. And again, as we pass through here through Waddy, it's amazing how quickly that construction is moving forward for widening the road. So we think we don't want to ignore that opportunity. Ultimately, the decision will be the state and the Federal Highway Administration. We have done some homework, working through consultants and talking to various folks in the industry. We've gotten feedback in northern Kentucky. There is a water project that has a permit to install water lines between 16-inch and 36-inch inside the right-of-way of interstates, I-75. And then we also, in Lexington, there is a permit to install a major sewer facility inside the right-of-way of Interstate 75. And so in both cases, we know that it is possible to get permission, but in some cases it may not be for the entire length. So, and again, our decision, therefore, since we don't know that answer yet, since we do not have the permits in hand at this point in time, was to assume from a cost perspective, assume that it's going into easements for the entire route. So that protects us as close as possible to a very conservative approach on the financial analysis. Then what we would do is then pursue, as we get into design, pursue permission in portions to install within the right-of-way.
I think it's real important what you said, and for people watching and people in the audience who see this as a kind of a silver bullet, that you have not had discussions yet at all with the state or with the Federal Highway Administration. And granted, there's pieces and parts that have been done around the state that may lend itself to pieces and parts, but what the communications that I've gotten from folks saying, you know, we need to look at this and this is great, it comes from the standpoint of somehow magically that you've already gotten those permissions, and I just wanted to point out that that's not been done yet. It's since from the beginning, and much less since the first meeting to today. And you mentioned the word assumption, and you know, all of these proposals are always built on some sort of assumptions. You have to, and that's the other thing that people out there have to understand as we're talking about this is that assumptions can get us in trouble. And I do remember when you did come the first time, I'd asked you very specifically about the annual rate increase to the retail customers, and it was approximately 5% a year. And I don't want that to get lost on folks, that there is, as Councilmember Stinnett said, there is a correlation somewhat between retail and wholesale, oftentimes, sometimes, but that has been the experience. Is it, Nick, if I could ask you to come to the mic for just a second, I want to ask a very specific question to you, and as far as is it my understanding that when a situation like this comes up, that if someone like Louisville Water is wanting to come into a municipality, that there needs to be a willing partner to tie in with? I mean, they need to have discussions with who owns the water system, whether it's the municipality in another case, or you in the case of a private owner. Is that correct?
Well, you're absolutely right. But I think more importantly, again, I think it's may just be a misunderstanding also of the Public Service Commission process, because we are a regulated utility. Louisville Water has intervened into the water supply case. As I said before, this planning group and said to many of the council members, everybody will have their day in court. You might say that we all will put our case on. All the interveners will put their case on, and the commission with their staff of engineers, accountants, and professionals who do this every single day will make a ruling based on not only just the project itself, but also the cost and what's best for the consumer long term. And I think the other X factor in this whole process is the timing issue. Well,
and I'm glad you said that, and I was going to say, after you all had been here and became interveners in the case, I think that's really one of the best things that happened in this body to understand, as well as folks watching, in that now it's in the hands of the PSC to look at the numbers on all sides. I mean, we've kind of had numbers that are confusing to us up here, and this body, it's fine and well to understand what are being proposed to the PSC, but I have a real problem with this body somehow trying to make some sort of determination based on a lot of assumed numbers when the PSC is the body charged with doing that. And because Louisville Water is officially now an intervener, those numbers have to be presented and the case is made, and as you said, meeting with the state before then and so forth. When is that meeting, Nick, with the PSC? When is their official hearing on this?
Well, the official hearing date has been moved to November 26th of this year.
Okay.
And again, I think you're very accurately that most of these issues, almost all these issues, will be vetted there in great detail. I think that this project is so massive in technical details, and there will be days and days of discovery that, in fairness to this planning group and to our council members, I'm not sure it's fair to you to try to understand all the numbers and all the details, but I really appreciate this planning group and the council trying to get underneath the cost, because you're concerned about the customers. But I also think we need to be mindful that the Attorney General has a role in this as an intervener, too, who represents all the consumers in the state of Kentucky and will be there to make sure that those issues are addressed.
So I guess in summation from my part, as I sit here and have listened to this, is that we have a situation where we've got an 18-year problem that we've been aware of, a water supply problem. We've gotten sidetracked on a number of other water issues over the past few years and not given a lot of attention to the problem. 10 years ago, we had looked at this as an option, and some folks that are actually in the room today said, no, that's not what we want, don't do it at all costs. And we've moved to a 1999 resolution that said, let's go find a Kentucky River solution. You and the Bluegrass Water Supply have tried to abide by that, and we have moved forward on that. And now here we are at a place where Louisville Water has come and said, hey, we want to offer you a solution, and I don't blame you at all, and we got to solve the problem. And again, I think what you said, Nick, about timing is a key factor. If we're serious about solving this problem, let's get serious about solving it. I want to point out that, again, it is the PSC's role, their mandated role, to sort through these numbers, and because Louisville Water is an intervener, now we don't, as a council, don't have to sit here and try and wade through some of this technical data, because all of that is vetted through that process. And I just wanted folks watching to kind of understand, because it can get very muddy and very unclear, and people are certainly emotional about water in this town, if we've learned anything over the last few years. And so I appreciate all of you all coming and dealing with this, because it's an issue we've got to get solved. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I hope that we have a chance, we've got a couple slides we like to present to the planning group too, that Linda like to present if we get that opportunity.
I had intended to
Okay.
call on you.
Thank you.
Are there other council members who have questions of the Louisville Water folks? If not, I have a few of my own. And of course, I do think this is important to elected officials who are not supposed to really look out for utilities, but they look out for their ratepayers and their citizens that they represent. So I appreciate both of you all being here today. It is an important issue for all of us. Going to page 6 of the Beck report, I guess, Mr. Wetzel, this might be you.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask a question about the Kentucky River Authority withdrawal fee. I do understand that because the Kentucky American solution uses the Kentucky River, they are required to have their ratepayers pay this fee. I don't yet quite understand. Could you explain why you built the fee into your proposal?
Well, first of all, the size of that fee is very small.
Yes.
So in the grand scheme of things, whether we included it or did not include it doesn't affect the analysis one way or the other. So as a predicate. But actually, this was put in at the request of Louisville Water Company, who didn't want this proposal to in any way negatively impact the Kentucky River Authority. And so there's a recognition that they're making a lot of improvements on the Kentucky River, which are important whether this water comes from the Kentucky River or the Ohio River, and so they didn't want to do anything that would negatively impact the Kentucky River Authority. Having said that, it also raises a question of who will own this pipeline, because the assumption in the model is this pipeline will be publicly owned, not owned by the Pool 3 option is owned 80% by Kentucky American and 20% by the bluegrass communities if they choose to go down the 25 MGD option. We're assuming that this pipeline will be owned by the public in some way. Now, that public body could be the Bluegrass Water Supply Commission, or perhaps it could be somebody like the Kentucky River Authority. But the embedded assumption is it's publicly owned, and so we didn't want to kind of squeeze them out because of this pipeline coming from Louisville.
So with now based on what you just said, with the assumption that it would be publicly owned, I know on the Kentucky American Water proposal, there's been some discussion of the Bluegrass Water Supply putting in a certain amount of money to own a certain percentage of it. Is that what you're referring to? Is that same kind of arrangement might be made on your proposal, or am I misunderstanding that?
In the Pool 3 option, the assumption is that there's 25 MGD of capacity built, 20 of which is owned by Kentucky American and 5 by Bluegrass. On the Louisville pipeline, it's nonspecific as to who might own it, except for the fact that it is in public hands. And that has an impact in terms of how the financing is done.
So there is the potential for the Bluegrass Water Supply Commission to own part of the Louisville water pipeline that would come this direction, if that...
Part or all.
That's how it worked out.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that would give some sort of, I don't know if you'd want to say comfort, but to the future of the use of the pipeline.
Yes, ma'am.
On page, toward the back of your presentation, you talked about a 42-inch pipeline versus a 36-inch pipeline, and this is kind of a detail question, but, and it may not make any difference. Is 42 inches the biggest pipeline?
No, ma'am.
So
It is the pipeline, however, that is designed into the Pool 3 option that is currently out for bid.
Okay, so that's why you use that kind of comparison. I was just thinking, you went down a few years down the road when there would need to be more pipeline or more capacity from either proposal. So would it not be something to consider to use a bigger pipeline in the beginning?
Possibly.
if the thought is there that there would need to be more capacity.
Right, although recognize that there's got to be enough customers on board early on to justify the larger diameter pipeline. Somebody has to pay for that pipeline, and therefore if the customers are not in place today with some kind of take-or-pay agreement that's going to guarantee that so much water is going to flow through that pipeline, then it doesn't make sense to build it much larger.
Okay. I think that's all my questions for now. I did have a comment in regard to the, Mr. McCord brought up the resolution from 1999, which I was here when that resolution was done, and although it does say that we preferred the Kentucky River as our first source, it also says we prefer the most cost-effective to our citizens. So I think that's one reason we're here today, is to look at that. So with that, if council members don't have any more questions, I'd like to ask, Councilmember Beard has a question.
Excuse me. I guess I'm a bit confused on this apples for apples. If, in fact, the Kentucky American Water Company proposal is at 80%, 20%, and yours is 100% publicly owned, it's not an apples for apples comparison, is it?
Well, not in the sense of who owns it, but the feeling was that we wanted to look at an option which was in the best interest of the citizens of the ultimately the ratepayers who were going to hook onto this system. And the most obvious choice to do that is to present a pipeline which is in public ownership. The option of Pool 3, we didn't have that option because that project is already designed, out for bid, and the deal is already cut in terms of what will happen with Pool 3.
And ongoing maintenance of the pipeline, if it's publicly owned, would be, I assume, the public's nickel?
Well, yes, but those costs are the same in either case.
Pardon me?
Essentially the same.
I'm sorry?
Those costs are essentially the same. Whatever operation and maintenance expenses that were applied to the Kentucky American pipeline are similarly applied as a direct cost to the Louisville pipeline. The difference between public and private ownership really relates to how the financing is accomplished and how the customers ultimately pay for the capital cost. The operating expenses are a direct cost to those customers out over the next 20 or 40 years.
Thank you.
Other council members? Thank you very much. What I'd like now is we have a list of folks in the audience who want to speak, but first I would, Mr. Heitzman,
Can I make
excuse me.
A few closing comments real quick?
Yes, that's fine.
Let me.
And then I would like to hear from Kentucky American in terms of any comments. Thank you.
We're passing out a brief summary of what we've covered over the past 3 meetings, and I'll just quickly cover these, and they're here for you. This wraps up and gives you the executive summary of what we see as the benefits for the Louisville pipeline. One, the Louisville pipeline is the best low-cost solution, both capital and operating, to meet Central Kentucky's growing water supply needs. The Louisville water pipeline will save ratepayers between $28 and $66 million over a 20-year period, and between $98 and $117 million over a 40-year period. The Louisville Water Company provides an unlimited source of supply from the Ohio River. Louisville has enough reserve capacity to meet Central Kentucky. We have an existing reserve capacity of 35 million gallons a day, and we can easily expand that to 95 million gallons a day. We also, the Louisville option, the Louisville pipeline provides a long-term drought protection and a reliable, redundant source that's independent from the Kentucky River. The Louisville pipeline along Interstate 64 is the least disruptive to the environment since that corridor has already been disturbed. Development already exists and is already encumbered by the interstate as well as other existing utilities. The Louisville pipeline provides connectivity for water providers along the Central Kentucky region. That includes the water providers in Shelby County as well as Central Kentucky. And it's also a project that is very attractive for state and federal grants. So in conclusion, we want to thank you for the opportunity over the past 3 meetings to allow us to make the presentation. And if there's any other further questions down the road, feel free to give us a call.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
And I hope you won't just shoot out the door. Someone may think of a question they have today.
We will stay here.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. At this point, I'd like to hear maybe from Linda Bridwell. Are you the point person today for Kentucky American? We heard your presentation last month, and so I'm wondering if you wanted to make any comment on this proposal and then take any questions.
Well, and let me just say, at this point, you know, I haven't seen any of the numbers until 1 o'clock, so it's a little difficult for me to make any definite comments. I can tell you right now, Kentucky American came into this meeting expecting to see something like this, and it's interesting to me that Louisville's made 4 different proposals to the BWSC. Their engineers and Kentucky American's engineers have all evaluated those proposals and come up with, it's not the cheapest, but then Louisville goes out and hires someone, and lo and behold, they come up with a presentation that, wow, it's cheaper. I'm not surprised, and we'll certainly get into the details of that with the Public Service Commission and the opportunities that we have going forward with that.
One of the things that we left from last meeting was questions of your presentation. I don't know what do you have another presentation?
I just have really a couple slides that I wanted to emphasize, because we were expecting some cost issues, and you all have been put in a very awkward position, and Kentucky American's aware of that. You know, you're really getting competing costs on issues that are extremely technical, and we've tried to simplify things and give you some more information. So in addition to the cost, I want you to keep in mind the timing, and if you could just put up the slides real quick. I just have...
I wonder if Vicki can get rid of that. Would you ask her? Now, is it different from last month?
This is different. The cover slide's the same, just because I wanted to emphasize again that the project that we have in front of the Public Service Commission is the project that has been developed with the regional utilities and developed regional consensus. And so I don't want you to lose sight of that fact, and I think there's some folks here from the BWSC that also want to emphasize that. We spent a long time trying to develop regional consensus on the right project for Central Kentucky. This is not Kentucky American going it alone. This is what we've tried to come up with as a regional group. But if you could, I get to control it up here. One of the other issues is the timing. And in Louisville's original proposal, they said, well, we could get it built in 2 to 3 years. And I want to emphasize to you, Kentucky American, without having any information from Louisville, has tried to give its best estimate on a schedule. I want to emphasize again, our project is designed. We completed design in April of this year. It has a substantial completion date of April 2010. The total project time from design to completion is 4 years. At this point, Louisville Water Company has initiated a couple minor reports, and that's all. Design hasn't started. A project completion date has not been identified. So to move quickly through this, because I know you all have other questions and other items on your agenda, we tried to come up with an estimate of a schedule. And again, the things on the left, the Kentucky American schedule, we're pretty firm on that. I mean, we know we have the design. We have all but 2 permits in hand. We have a public service a hearing sitting, and we have bid dates. I mean, we have bids coming in another month. Trying to back into when we think, if we started with a Louisville project, Kentucky American's not going to do anything until we get an order from the Public Service Commission. And so backing into some critical path items, the most optimistic that we could come up with on completing that project would be December of 2012, which is almost 2.5 years. Well, it is more than 2.5 years past the completion date. So again, while we're sitting in a drought this summer and we have an immediate need, both now and into the near future, we're talking about an option that at best is going to push us back over 2 years on getting completed. And then just finally, one of the points that I want to mention that seems to be conveniently left out of the R.W. Beck report, Louisville certainly does have a current capacity of 35 MGD that they're not using, but their own study from 2002 of Black and Veatch has demand projections that by the year 2020, just the growth in their service area is going to eliminate their reserve capacity down to 7.5 million gallons. Now, they haven't talked about the cost of expanding their capacity to meet our needs. I didn't see that anywhere in the report, and maybe it's in the detailed report or it's in some other information. But keep in mind that when they talk about this reserve capacity, they have their own demand projections that are going to have to be addressed, and their own growth in the Louisville area that's going to have to be addressed. So, again, I don't want to get in here trying to debate this back and forth in front of you all. We're just trying to give you some simple information because you've asked, and I know you've expressed some concerns, but certainly there are some issues that the Public Service Commission is going to have to dig into in a lot of detail. So with that, that was really all we wanted to present today, and certainly if you all have any other questions about what we talked about last time or what we've presented today, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you so much. Council members, I don't have anyone on my list. Are there any questions? I will give the Louisville folks an opportunity to respond to what you just said about capacity, if they wish. I have one question based on Councilmember McCord's question of the Louisville folks. Last month you said you did not know what your rate increases had been. Can you tell us, do you know that today? Since we know what the Louisville rate increases were over the last few years, do you have that information today?
I do not have that off the top of my head. I will certainly be happy to supply that to you, and we can do that this afternoon.
I think council members would appreciate that, because we all realize that all water companies increase their rates, and so that's not just a domain of one or the other. If you could give us that information.
We will be happy to.
And then did Louisville folks have anything they wanted to say about this capacity issue? I think that's important.
A couple issues before. Madam, if you will, since you gave Louisville a chance, I'd like to give me a chance to address some of the issues they said, if you don't mind.
McRow.
And all due respect. Financing. You know, you hear a lot about public-private financing. That's been a big debate around that issue. One of the things this community, I think, doesn't realize, and in all fairness, they don't need to worry about it because they have a good water provider. One of the benefits of American Water is the fact that we can borrow money at rates that are unbelievable, not because of Kentucky American, but because of our size of American Water. So when you look at the public-private financing, I heard a lot about that. We have an agreement with American Water Capital Corp., which is our parent company. So we're able to borrow money at very, very low rates, and we have looked at tax-exempt financing and a lot of mechanisms that will come forward through the Public Service Commission review process. And I just want to let this planning committee know that, you know, we're not in position. I think Linda did very good in trying to tell you that this case will be tried in front of the Public Service Commission. We in fairness to everyone, we can't try it anywhere but there because they're a regulatory authority. And all these issues will come out, the financing, the engineering costs, the schedule, the time, what's best for the customers. And I think that's why you've seen so many endorsements of this regional project. And we talk a lot about Kentucky American, and in all fairness to the Bluegrass Water Commission, they've played a key role here. They really have. You know, they were part of the process, and their engineering firm that really came up with the design, and we remember that BWSC. So it's like Linda said, sometimes we forget about the hard work that that group has done. They're not here to speak today, but I just want to make sure we don't leave them out. And lastly, you know, we've done a lot of research on this issue over the last couple of decades, and our most recent research shows that those customers who are listening right now, watching this session, are saying, please get on with a solution, Kentucky American. Get this done, which is the same thing the Public Service Commission is saying. And the majority of the customers are saying they have the confidence in our company to get this issue solved. They realize we have a regulatory oversight of Public Service Commission. And I think when it's all said and done, I hope this planning group comes to the same conclusion that so many of the regional players and so many, the chambers and so many other folks have came to, that this is, including the Attorney General, that this is best for our consumers. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much. I do have, if you would like to respond, Mr. Heisman, and then I have council member questions, perhaps of Kentucky American. I'm not sure who they're going to be directed to.
I'll provide a couple of comments, one on capacity, the other one on the time schedule. One on the capacity, that 2002 Black and Veatch report that was represented indeed did have that. That is an excerpt out of that. What we were concerned is we then retained we were concerned about what is our capacity of record as a result of that 2002 study, and what would the Division of Water recognize as our firm reserve capacity. So we commissioned a study. We began it in 2006, completed it this year in 2007, and it confirmed that we have 240 million gallons a day of reserve of total capacity, yielding 35 million gallons of reserve capacity. So it's an updated report since 2002. And what we did essentially is an extensive review of all of our facilities at both plants, and we moved, previously we had 225 million gallons a day that was moved to 240. So that capacity issue has been addressed. Further, in the R.W. Beck report, we've covered that issue in the detailed report that's provided, that the Louisville Water Company will commit to the adequate reserve capacity for existing customers as well as the capacity needed over the 40-year period as part of our commitment to get water to that delivery point in Shelbyville. So that's important information to know. Okay. The third point on the schedule is we do recognize that we have not initiated design. As I mentioned earlier, we have initiated design this month beginning on the Jefferson County portion. And that pipeline is going to move from Jefferson County into Shelby County. So we're now moving into that design phase, and then, and I need to look at the chart that Linda provided and all the assumptions, as we mentioned earlier. All construction schedules and all financial analysis have a whole host and set of assumptions associated with being able to build or finance a particular project. We need to take a look at that. My initial reaction is that we can compress that schedule, take advantage of the existing infrastructure that's in place along the routes in both Shelby County and Franklin County, and be able to get the needed supply of water by 2010. And if you recall, 6 million gallons a day is the amount that's needed in 2010, not 25 million gallons a day. So that's the first challenge is you can take phase one and literally build it in phase 1A, phase 1B, et cetera, to be able to maximize the use of capital. And then, as I mentioned before, we would envision issuing multiple contracts, Contract A, Contract B, and Contract C, all working in parallel to be able to expedite the schedule, to be able to provide a completion of water supply by 2010.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Beard.
Thank you, Chair. No, my voice is still a mess. As being the individual who initially put this issue into the Planning Commission by motion at a council meeting, I just wanted everybody to understand on both sides of the horseshoe that I know that the Public Service Commission is the forum for and the body that will make the decision on this. It's not us. But our constituents need to know also, and we have a little broader mechanism to be able to communicate with them here with GTV and the press than the Public Service Commission has. And they have a vital interest in all of this also. And so that's why it's here, is to communicate actually to all of our constituents in Central Kentucky, for that matter, and not just amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, any other council members? Before we go to our audience, I have several people who've signed up to speak, and if you will, when you come to the podium, please say your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes. So first is Bill Greer, and following Bill will be Sandy Broman, and then we have others.
For those of you who I'm meeting for the first time today, I'm Bill Greer, live at 712 Cromwell Way here in town. And I've been associated with the Lexington water supply problem since the 1988 drought, and I'm somewhat casually familiar with it. I was part of the Scotty Basler team that did the original study. I've been a consultant to the Kentucky River Authority in various capacities. I am now on the Kentucky River Authority. I did the valve operating plan for them. I've written a book on the Kentucky River. And as a member of the Fayette County Water Supply Planning Council. I was very, very strongly in the camp of the Louisville pipeline was the solution to the Lexington water supply problem, in contrast to the Kentucky River solution. The reason I took this position is this. The Kentucky River solution that was on the table at that time consisted of raising locks and dams, numbers 9 through 14, by something in the range of 4 to 6 feet each, for a few $1 million total. I knew in my engineer's heart of heart that this could not and would not be done. The facts are that it has not and will not be done within the lifetime of most of the people in this room. The Louisville pipeline at that time was a very immediate solution to a very, very real water supply problem here. A lot of the engineering work had been done. Some contract negotiations had been undertaken. It was an immediate project. I was all for the pipeline at that time because that was the immediate solution to our very, very great problem. That was in 1999 and 98. Since then, of course, we know that not very much has happened. And I feel right now, I know right now, that the Kentucky River solution is the best one to supply our water needs at this time. And the reason I've changed my mind is this. Because I knew that the Kentucky River solution that was proposed in 1999 would not be done, but right now, the Pool 3 solution is ready to go. It's been bid, it's on the table, the bids will be open in actually just a few days. The work has been done. It's an immediate solution to a very real problem, one that we have right now. But something else that hasn't really come up. Pool 3 is below Lake Harrington. And Lake Harrington contains more available water in it than all of the pools in the Kentucky River put together. Now, normally, Kentucky Utilities does not release water more than 15 or 20 feet down, but there are another 200 feet of water in that pool that are available if we have a real emergency. At that time, a real emergency like the 1930 drought, all of the surface waters of Kentucky are under the control of the governor. He could order these waters released in an emergency. Normally that is not done. This makes the Pool 3...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your time is up.
This makes the Pool 3 a highly advantageous solution to our problem. And I would urge this council to reaffirm its position and support of the Pool 3 position of the Kentucky River solution that was done earlier.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next is Sandy Broman.
My name is Sandy Broman. I've been a resident of Lexington, Fayette County since 1956. Been a continuous resident. I'm a graduate of the University of Kentucky. I have a degree in engineering. Been here a long time and feel like I'm part of the community as well. I found several things very interesting in the presentation so far, and I wore my tie so that we could talk about that. Seems to be all about the money, folks. That's what we're talking about here, is we're talking about money. Everybody's money, your money, and a lot of the ratepayer money. You already know what the plans on the table are. There's a phase 1 pipeline, there's a phase 2 pipeline through Carroll County and Owen County, and there's a pipeline to Louisville. We already know what the projects are. I made a base cost analysis of both Kentucky American and Louisville Water's previous testimony. I hadn't seen any of the stuff that they said for today, but I took the numbers both from the Public Service Commission filings, which is the $6 million you see on the third page there, Kentucky American's base cost, One of the things they did leave out is what the cost of debt service is. We talked about how we've got lots of it available, but we didn't talk about the cost of it. $160 million at 5% over 20 years has a debt service cost of $12 million a year. $12 million a year. Add those numbers together with the profit that's allowed, and it comes to $20 million a year for the first year. We're going to produce 6 million gallons a day from that plant to begin with. That gives us a unit cost of $9.17 per 1,000 gallons. I went ahead and made a present value extension of that and added the cost for producing each additional 1 million gallons of water. On the next sheet, I did the same thing for a municipally owned line coming from Louisville. I used the costs that we've been talking about. I haven't escalated those either. I still use the $55 million cost that we talked about earlier. I added in the cost of debt service for that as well, and maintenance on and power costs on that, and also escalated that. If you'll turn to my pretty little chart, you'll find the real bottom line. As you look at the chart from left to right, you see when we start out taking 6 million gallons a year, the difference between the cost of purchasing water from Louisville Water and reselling it to our customers is $12 million to the ratepayers. As we escalated up to 7 million gallons a day, it goes to $11,500,000 difference in cost to the ratepayers. Over a 20-year period, including upgrades to the treatment works and a pipeline to the Ohio River, the total comes to $173,403,930 difference to the ratepayers. We're not talking about cost to the water. We're talking about the difference between what it would cost to purchase water from Louisville and the cost of producing water on Pool 3.
Mr. Broman, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your 3 minutes is finished.
Yes, ma'am. I'd just like to say a little bit an opposite conclusion. I think the conclusion that you should reach is a municipally owned pipeline from Louisville to Lexington. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Mr. Jim McWilliams, and following Jim will be Mr. Tom Marshall. Go ahead and state your name and address, please, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to address the Planning Committee today. My name is Jim McWilliams, and I currently live in northern Franklin County. It's about a mile from where the Elkhorn Creek empties into the Kentucky River on Pool 3. I'm just a few miles away from the proposed water treatment plant. I've cut my presentation down by 2/3, so I'm just going to hit some highlights today. I firmly believe that the decision or the opinion that this body will render could very well seal the fate of this entire project. I think it's very important what you say as a body. I've studied this Kentucky American proposal and the Kentucky Basin for 9 months extensively since I got a letter from Kentucky American. I'm going to read a partial list of reasons that I think this is bad public policy. Kentucky American's plan will not meet the long-term water needs of the region. An expensive and necessary Phase 2 is rarely discussed by Kentucky American. And of course, we heard a good side-by-side presentation today. Kentucky American's plan will not drought-proof the region. If you'll just take a look at the paltry amount of water that is flowing over Dam 4 into Pool 3 currently, which is the site of the proposed treatment plant, you can readily see this. Their plan will not provide protection against catastrophic events that may occur in and along the Kentucky River, such as large-scale contamination or dam failure due to natural, accidental, or terroristic acts. It places all of our eggs in one basket. This plan is not cost-effective for the people of Central Kentucky. The citizens of Central Kentucky should be better served by a pipeline, would be better served by a pipeline connection to the Louisville Water Company, and by insisting that the Kentucky American fix their well-documented treatment capacity deficit. The Kentucky American proposal will duplicate facilities requiring the construction of a new water treatment plant, when the Louisville Water Company has excess capacity and is willing to sell. I am personally affected by Kentucky American's proposal in several ways. My property is located on the proposed pipeline path and is a few miles from the proposed water treatment plant on the Kentucky River. I will be subject to higher water rates well into the future if this plan gets the green light. The Kentucky American proposal will inflict a large amount of damage to areas of Scott and Franklin counties, including areas that are mostly rural. I would have to ask, would Fayette Countyans like it if Kentucky American dug and blasted an 8-foot deep trench through 30 miles of their prime farmland? I think not. I also expect my taxes to increase as this ill-advised pipeline path will subject the interior of the Golden Triangle to unchecked and unsustainable sprawl. Again, an area that is largely rural right now.
Mr. McWilliams, your time is up.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
In closing, citizen demands for infrastructure improvement will increase dramatically. More roads, more utilities, more schools, and more governmental services will be required and will be demanded.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'd like to introduce this into the record.
Okay. Thank you very much. Tom Marshall.
Hi. My name is Tom Marshall. I live in Frankfort, Kentucky. I'm an attorney. I'll be very brief with 3 minutes. A little bit of background as to why I have an interest in this. I'm a former general counsel of the Public Service Commission, so these utility issues interest me greatly. I live in Franklin County, and I can tell you the natives are restless in Franklin County about this proposal. Indeed, our fiscal court has passed a resolution saying that, no, we don't need this proposal. What we need is for the Kentucky American Water Company and Louisville Water Company to work together and come up with a solution that will give us a reliable and redundant supply that will protect everyone in central Kentucky, and that route should go down I-64. If you don't know, at the Public Service Commission the other night, Carl Rollins, who is the representative from Woodford County and represents part of Franklin County, appeared, and part of his statement was that he thought that the best solution was to go down the interstate. It was the least destructive. He did not like the fact that it went through the prime farmland in Scott and Franklin counties. I urge you to take a ride down the Elkhorn Valley in the areas that are going to be disturbed. I think that it will open your eyes as to just what is going to happen. Quickly, there's been a lot of talk about a partnership between Bluegrass Water Supply Commission and Kentucky American. I think if you look at the facts, you will find that this partnership is not all that it's been touted to be. It could be that you'll find that it's kind of a shell partnership at this point. It is no longer controlled by the Bluegrass Water Supply Commission. It is now controlled by Kentucky American. It is only a 20% buy-in, and to get the 20% buy-in, they need $60 million. And in order to get that $60 million, they have stated that they need to get $25 million from the state and $35 million from the federal government. And that's to buy down the water to where they can afford it. So it's not in excess, and perhaps well in excess, of $3 per 1,000 gallons. All of these are important issues. They need to be investigated. I commend you for looking at this issue because Kentucky American in the past has said, oh, we're doing this because Lexington said in 1999, this is what we need to do. I don't think this is what you told them that they need to do. I hope and I believe that part of what you told them to do is you ought to look at Pool 9 and you ought to look at Pool 10 and the others. Look at crest gates. I mean, if you didn't, you should have. I mean, they need to look at those crest gates and see if you can have your treatment in place, expand the treatment that you've got now so you don't have the destructive line that's going through Franklin County. Increase the capacity in Pool 10. That will help Winchester. Winchester needs help. Put that crest gate. Kentucky River Authority, put that crest gate on Dam 10. While you got 9 under construction, you should have done something about putting a crest gate there. It would have taken care of your problems. Look at the water leaks. Look at conservation. This is not necessary. So you need a real Kentucky River solution. You need to look at whether or not this partnership is really a partnership, and you need to look at conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Foster Ackerman.
Members of the Planning Committee, Foster Ackerman, office at 209 East High Street, Lexington, Kentucky, 40507. First, I would like to compliment the Urban Council and this planning committee for having these hearings and making these investigations in order to determine which of the options that have been presented might be the better or best that would be available for this community in central Kentucky. You may wonder why I'm interested in this. Over 50 years ago, when I was attorney for the city of Lexington and Shelby Kincaid was mayor, we went to Philadelphia to see Mr. Ware, the then chief executive officer of American Water Works Company. The purpose of our visit was to see if American Water Works would consider negotiating with the city of Lexington for the acquisition of then the Lexington Water Company. We spent an hour with Mr. Ware. He was a very pleasant fellow, very entertaining, never would discuss the subject that we came to visit him about. And I finally asked him, I said, Mr. Ware, are you going to talk about what you know we came to visit you about? He said, no, I am not. So we left. But I've had an interest in water supply, rates, ever since that time. I'm not here today to talk about purchase of the water company. But I think this committee, the Urban Council, and the administrative officers of the city of Lexington should be aggressively investigating with all the tools at their command these proposals to find out which one is better. Once the expenditure gets in the rate base, and particularly when you're talking about plants that need to be replaced in probably every 30 years, that stays in the rate base for all practical purposes. And you know that the Public Service Commission does not always be the final authority in terms of negotiation. I would like to see negotiations with the people who are making these proposals to see if there is not a better proposal that can be made. And that can only happen if this government aggressively pursues that objective. I think that the presentations that have been made here covered a lot of the subjects that I had proposed to discuss with you, but I don't have time now. And I thank you for the opportunity, but I do hope that you will consider my suggestions that we aggressively get into the details so that the best rate and best supply of water will be available.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Don Pratt.
I hope I can see with my new eyes. I can't real well.
Will you state your name and address, please?
Don Pratt, 210 Walton Avenue, Lexington, Kentucky. I, unlike a previous spokesperson, was on the opposite side of the fence regarding the Woodford County line that Kentucky American proposed a number of years ago because it was in the wrong place. I have seen this and heard this and have been curious about this issue with an open mind after I heard that this was going to happen at the cost it is. Now, I listened and I praised Louisville Water Company for the figures they gave in the sense that they were conservative. In fact, they probably overestimated the cost of their construction, their other prices that they put in there. And I'm sorry, I don't understand them all. I really don't. I am just a duckling in this pond. And believe me, at all these hearings, I've seen and heard the ducks lined up. And I have to say, with all honesty, the only duckling, or a duck that we had was probably Sandy, because he knew more about it than seemed everybody I talked to on our side. Everybody else was sort of a duckling learning as we swam. To be honest with you, the PSC, not because of Louisville Water Company, opened this to public comment because of the concerns of the ratepayers. And believe me, the ratepayers will not be protected by these ducks that aren't Aflac ducks. The ducks that they have lined up are actually going to be the ducks on the Christmas table. We, the ratepayers, will be eaten up by public utilities that want to take it out of our back pockets. And in this case, this public utility wants to increase their investments as well as their profits off of that investment, and we will pay that figure as citizens and as ratepayers. The reason they are here is because you all are extremely important. You can represent us. You can tell the Public Service Commission that we deserve the cheapest alternative with the best supply. And I do not want to come back here in 2050 to fight this battle again, because I will have a hard time creeping up here, I am sure, and a much harder time expressing myself. Support a resolution to represent the ratepayers of Fayette County and get the cheapest alternative. And if you can prove to me that Kentucky Americans is cheaper, I will be up here fighting just as hard. But you have not, and what I have seen and I have heard says that we will be taken advantage of. We will be the ducks on the Christmas table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Was there anyone who did not get to sign the sheet who would like to speak? Council members, do you have any further questions? No? Well, I want to thank our Louisville Water folks, Kentucky American folks, citizens, and everyone who has come today. And I just might ask Ms. Bridwell if you could contact Mr. Schoniger with that information, that would be good, and then he'll see that it gets out. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move forward with our second item on the agenda, which is Loudon Avenue Phase 1. And Mr. Schoniger has a packet of information.
This is in Newtown.
Oh, his is on Newtown. Pages 1 through 8 are information on the Loudon Avenue Phase 1.
I believe Bob Baird or someone from engineering is here to give us the update verbally. Thank you.
It looks like Mr. Lay Carr.
Yes, ma'am.
And Bob Baird.
Right now, we have 87 properties that we have closed on out of the 93. I have 2 additional closings that are scheduled within the next week on these. I've got a couple that I still have property issues with, working on partial mortgage releases, and we're trying to get these all completed by next Friday. That's our intent, depending on how the banks work with those partial mortgage releases on where we stand there.
Council members, do you have questions? No questions. It's, I just received the news that Mr. Lay Carr may be retiring. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, let me just say from my many years of working with you, thank you very much for your service. You have been terrific in helping our citizens, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then on your packet, council members, pages 9 through 12 are the Liberty Road update. And you're also on for that?
I'm still on for that one also. This is the Section 1B, which is from the Todd's Road, Liberty Road corridor out towards Forest Hill Drive. We have 8 out of 16 agreements that have been signed. 6 of those have been closed on. We are currently working on those other 8 property owners, but we've got heavy opposition with them. So I don't have a real time frame of when they may come to a conclusion.
Okay. Are there any questions from council members? I thought we might hear from Councilmember Stinnett.
Thank you, Chair. Leigh, I too want to thank you for all your work and dedication to the city. I know we've only worked together about 3 years now, but it's been a wonderful experience, and I appreciate your dedication, especially on Liberty Road project and moving it forward. So thanks to you, that's why we're starting today, and your guys that work in your area and getting those going. So that being said, who's going to take your spot? We have about 8 properties left for the Phase 1B of Liberty Road. Who is going to fill in your shoes after next week? Who do we call to? Mr. Barrett, would that be yourself?
He is my supervisor.
Yes, I will be the primary contact to keep you apprised of things, questions you have.
Who will be doing the right-of-way negotiations, acquisitions going forward for all projects, not just this one?
The vacancy will be advertised, interviews, it'll be refilled. Presently, Mary Bennett in our section is the other person who does some of our minor acquisition reviews.
And do we anticipate a lengthy process to fill the vacancy?
Not sure. We have tried to get it fast-tracked as much as possible. Don't know that it has been advertised. We have not received a list of names, but we're wanting to get somebody in quickly.
Well, I know from a council member standpoint, I know Councilmember James and Councilmember Crosby and Councilmember Cord and Mr. Blues also have projects that require right-of-way right now that are pretty much an emergency projects getting these things done. Any support we can lend to you to get this fast-tracked would be welcome from our end. So let us know on that. One update on Liberty Road, Bob, or Mr. Barrett. What is the status of the sanitary sewer line relocation?
The sanitary sewer line construction is basically done. We have the connections to do on the 24-inch line. They've been filling that with water, preparing to do the pressure test and the exfiltration test. We should know by the end of this week the results of that, and that we're ready to move on with the connection and the abandonment of the piece on the school site.
I know you mentioned the school site. That's obviously a big concern that we have in the district, and if we don't get that sewer line moved fairly quickly, it could postpone the opening of that school, and that's the last thing we definitely want to do. I know, especially in your department, we want to see happen. But I want to thank both of you. Obviously, Liberty Road is well under construction now. There's been a lot of grubbing work. I believe I saw KU out there yesterday starting to relocate their poles, which is a welcome sight. I know we had a brief hiccup last night with the gas line, but I think they did get out there and get that repaired, and they were back out this morning at 7 a.m. moving those poles. So thank you all again for your work on the project, and look forward to working with you, Mr. Barrett, going forward.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? If not, again, Leigh, thank you so much for your dedicated work for Urban County government. And next, we have Andrew Grunwald is sitting back there. We'll have our Newtown Pike update. Welcome.
Hello. I'll try to be real brief. I'll try to keep it to 3 minutes. We had last month, I don't believe that you all got to me because of all the discussion on the water lines, but so included today there were two handouts which I hope you received. The first one basically had a paper clip on it. This was the handout from last time. It was the same handout that I handed out at the MPO last month. Essentially, basically a 1 month snapshot and a project schedule for phases 1 and 4. A little bit more importantly is the handout with the butterfly clip on it. That is this month's handout. And included with this handout is a project schedule for the entire schedule for the entire project all the way through the end of approximately 2014. Also is included with this is the financial plan for the Newtown Pike extension, which will be included in the record of decision. And I'm going to go over that here in a minute. Some of the things I'd like to say about the record of decision, that's our final piece of our environmental impact statement. We have two outstanding issues. One of them is the financial plan, which you now have a copy of. It's considered a draft until the record of decision is finalized. We were asked by the Transportation Cabinet to look at inflation. So what we have done is we have adjusted the numbers at 4% with a baseline year of 2007, the year that the environmental impact statement will be approved. Basically, what this does is it does affect our bottom line. The overall cost of the project, with inflation included, the dates at which the money will be utilized takes us to a total project cost of approximately $87 million. With that said, the bottom line that we need in additional funding in the next 6-year transportation plan is approximately $40 million. Now, this is depicted in the financial plan. The financial plan is coordinated and matches the overall project schedule. As money is available or is made available in the 6-year plan, hopefully we can stay on track with that schedule. If money is not available, that schedule will begin to slip, basically, and just move back as the money becomes available. Again, I'd like to basically make everybody understand that that financial plan is not final. It's still under review by the Transportation Cabinet as well as the Federal Highway Administration. I wish I could have gotten this to you all a little bit earlier, but even up until last Friday, it was still being amended. So, and it's still being amended now. Basically, you're getting a snapshot. I don't necessarily think the cost will increase a significant amount. The inflation was the big key issue. That request did come from the Transportation Cabinet. It was something that was done for the Louisville, the Twin Bridges project, and they felt that this was such a large project that it also should be analyzed and inflation taken into account. For the Phase 1, the temporary housing area, we are going to recommend Woodall Construction for the construction of that temporary area. They're going to do the site work. Construction hopefully will begin in mid-October. This contract hopefully will be to you all on October 4th for dual reading. As far as the Phase 4, this is Main Street to Versailles. The Transportation Cabinet has been working in cooperation with us. We have not totally ruled out the idea of a design-build project, but at this point, we are going to proceed with that project in our traditional manner, at which point we do right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, and then the construction of the project. We have broken up the right-of-way acquisition. The District 7 office of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet is going to oversee that for us, and the Lexington Federman County Government Division of Engineering will manage the utility relocations. Construction management probably will be decided at a later date, depending on workloads of the two departments. It's kind of a lot to absorb in a really short time, but I can entertain questions if that would.
Well, I don't know if there are a couple council members who have questions, and you may get questions later after council members have had time to read this, but Councilmember Beard.
Andrew, if for funding reasons we're stalled at any point along this timeline, the costs will go up, will they not, the ultimate costs, in all probability?
Yes, sir, in all probability they would. The 4% was the recommended number to use. The Transportation Cabinet actually provided that number. Yeah.
The inflation factor?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilmember James.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Section is equal to phasing, right? I just want to make sure my terminology is phase equal to section, so where you're referring, okay. So on, I can't find the page I was looking at, but there was one that said section 2, and there would be some additional right-of-way that would be necessary at that time, or some purchase of right-of-way. Let me find the page.
You might have to, yeah, give me a page number.
It's a lot of paperwork. See?
Andrew, it's the page that starts, I think, with the topic phrasing. One of the first, I think that's the same page you're talking about. Talks about sections 1 through 4.
Yeah.
It's about halfway. There's no numbers on it, but it's probably
there's no numbers.
halfway in.
It's the one it's where you've done the costs for inflation at 4%, where you've made your changes based on 4%.
Oh, the page is up on the screen now?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And I was looking at section 1, where the additional right-of-ways will be needed for the year 2011. And I just wondered, you have listed that section 2 is the area where the current Nathaniel Mission, and there's another company that's listed there as well. I wondered, is there housing in the section 2 where residents are living right now?
No, ma'am. The section 2 or phase 2 of the project, essentially that's from Versailles to Broadway. It will encompass the rebuilding of the South End Park, which is down there now. The Nathaniel Mission lot will be included in that. This also includes we have a commercial portion of the Community Land Trust.
Mm-hmm.
That will be included in section 2. Basically, you'll have the site prep for that commercial relocation, or that commercial business is owned by the Community Land Trust.
Okay.
But there is no residential housing in that section.
Okay, so the money that you have allotted for right-of-way, who's that going to? Who will we be purchasing right-of-way from?
Well, that money will be basically essentially the Norfolk Southern Railroad line. There are numerous properties that we'll have to buy in that area.
Is that listed here in some of this information?
Who we actually are going to buy it from?
Yeah, I mean, if you do the cost estimates, you must know for right-of-way, you have the property addresses that you need to acquire in order. Do we have that information?
It's not contained in that packet, but I can make that available to you.
Okay.
If you like.
I'd be interested in having that. I don't know if other council members would like that, but I'd like, if there's going to be right-of-way needed to be acquired, I'd love to have that list for reference.
The total right-of-way purchase for this project will encompass about 50 acres of land that we're going to buy. We have broken it down per section, and I can get you that list if you'd like.
So will the South, and maybe I should know this, but will the South End Park then become just part of the land trust? It won't be part of Urban County government and parks that we
It will actually be donated back to the city of Lexington.
Oh.
The land trust will not own the park itself.
Okay. Okay.
So we will own the park.
Thank you. If you would get that right-of-way information to me, I'd love it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And actually, Andrew, other council members might want to see it also. If you want to get it to Paul, and he could distribute it to council members. Do other council members have questions? Yes, Councilmember James.
I just have one other
That's
question I
fine.
forgot to ask. How are the neighborhood meetings going with the community
Community Land Trust?
at the Carver Center? Is that where you guys hold those?
We hold those meetings, basically, the project team holds a meeting once a month, every third Thursday, and those meetings are going fairly well.
Okay.
We have one, as a matter of fact, this Thursday.
Okay. At what time?
Usually I get there about 4:30, and I think they begin at 5.
They meet at 5 o'clock? Okay, thank you very much.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Appreciate the update.
I will be giving out the
yes.
same packet of information at the MPO meeting,
Okay.
at the
All
next
right.
MPO meeting, so.
Okay, thank you. Council members, if you'll turn over to the back of the Planning Committee packet, we have several items on our outstanding items, and next month, we want to look at our, let's see, Downtown Development Authority Land Bank will be on the agenda, and I wanted to ask if council members felt we could have our Liberty Road, Newtown Pike, and Loudon Avenue update, if we could skip a month, or if you would want to have that information for information only in the packet, so that we can, you know, attend to a few more of these items. What's your pleasure?
Well, Loudon
Yes.
Avenue is only quarterly anyway, so.
Yeah,
we
it's
wouldn't address that
quarterly.
one.
So Liberty Road and Newtown, can we schedule those for November? Okay. And then we'll work our way through some of these other issues that might be ready. How does that sound? Okay. If there's no other business, then do I hear a move? A move? Thank you. The meeting's adjourned.